wife and
Hi.
in Atlanta for some time after his first wife Billy had passed away. Oh, back comes rolling down.
Hi, I'm going to be listening to strange music. I'm also going to listen to this guy, Ravi Zakarias, and it's called God's Plan for Your Life. While I'm playing the computer game of chess, so here it goes.
The hill, and it says how the tears were just pouring down his face. I really believe Bunyan had read the story with the woman of alabaster ointment to find the turning.
I'm going to play the computer at medium here.
Because the tears flowing, just like the woman. Peace be unto you, just like the Lord.
The computer is white, and I'm going to be black.
Okay. Leave that moment, the angel of dawn, and then you get the angel of daybreak. The angel of daybreak takes away the old garments and puts on the new ones and puts the mark on the forehead. And then there's the angel of dusk, which gives a scroll to give you a map for the journey. What would you want? Thy sins be forgiven thee, the new garments that you now wear, and the map to lead you on and guide you into the future. The angel of dawn, the angel of daybreak, and the angel of dusk. He calls them the three shining ones. How beautiful an ordinary tinker seeing the beauty of the gospel, and he takes you through all of Vanity Fair and all of that stuff and brings you right to that mountain where at the sight of the cross, the bag just falls down. Recently when Cliff Barrows passed away, I told this story of a memory with Cliff and his wife, and they lived in Atlanta for some time after his first wife Billy had passed away. He married beautiful Ann Barrows, and they made their home in Atlanta, Georgia. We used to meet quite often. Cliff was an amazing man, absolutely an amazing man. He got the world singing, "This is my story, this is my song," praising my Savior all the day long. But Cliff didn't know that my worldview changes at 9 p.m. So he came to our house for dinner, and about 9:05, the lights started to go out in the house. He was still telling me all of the memories of his years with Billy Graham, what flight they'd missed, what they had in Northeast India, and so on. And as these lights are going off, Anne says to him, "Darling, I think we've outstayed our welcome. The lights are going out in this house." So I said, "It's okay, Cliff. Your stories are more interesting. I'll turn the lights back on." Then before he left, I said, "Cliff, I want to tell you one story that you probably don't know." He said, "What is it?" I said, "There was a man who came to meet me when I was speaking for James Kennedy once. He walked up to the front and he shook hands with me. And I said to him, 'What's your name?' He said, I said, 'Where are you from?' He said, 'Romania.' I said, 'What's your name?' He said, 'Dwight Barrows.' I said, 'Dwight Barrows from Romania?' I said, 'How does a Romanian get a name like Dwight Barrows?' He said, 'It's a long story.' He said, 'During the days of Ceausescu, I wanted to escape. I swam across some waters. I arrived in Vienna, and I stood outside the American embassy day after day, begging them to let me in. I wanted to meet the ambassador. They wouldn't let me do it. So I kept sitting outside the embassy and said, I'm not going to leave till you allow me to meet the ambassador. So he comes into the embassy. Finally, the ambassador says, bring him in. He said, what do you want? He said, I want to move to America. He said, I don't want to go back to Romania. And the ambassador looked at him and he said, you know what? I like you. I'll give you the visa to get to America, but you're going to have to promise me to read 2 books. He said, which books are those? He gave him the Bible, and he gave him the biography of Dwight L. Moody. He said, read these 2 books, I'll get you into America. And they came here. He said, so I arrived in Detroit. I started working for the automotive company, but I got into alcohol and drugs. I was basically making a mess of my life. Periodically, when I was sober, I would read Dwight Moody's story and so on and so forth. And he said, one night I was so down, I started to walk way towards Pontiac Stadium. I said, thousands of people coming out, and I thought it was a football game. I found out it wasn't. It was some kind of religious meeting that was going on. And they were leaving, and it was over. So I walked up to the platform to find out what it really was about, and there was a man there folding chairs. And the man looked at me and said, can I help you? He said, am I late for the meeting? He said, yes, it's over, but come on up, let's talk. And he said, that man led me to lead Jesus Christ. His name was Cliff Barrows. Cliff looked at me and his eyes were so flooded with tears. He said, Ravi, I remember the incident. You gotta be kidding me. I said, Cliff, after he came to know the Lord, he got baptized and he took Dwight L. Moody's first name and your last name, and he was baptized as Dwight Barrows. About 5 or 6 years ago, Cliff phoned me. He said, do you know how I can get a hold of him? I said, well, why don't you just Google his name? It's not a common name. You'll find it out. He did. He tracked him down. And Cliff, in his book of memoirs, was going to put the whole story down. You see, when transformation comes, there's always a series of events and a series of people involved. You never do it on your own. God brings somebody into your life. Just before I came here, Pastor's son James came and asked me if I'd sign a copy of that book for a friend who's in the audience tonight, who said he was an atheist, read the book, I don't know whether it was Can Man Live Without God or which one of the programs we'd done, and gave his life to the Lord. He's in the audience here tonight. If you went from story to story to story, you'll find out the power of the transformed life, the power of transformed hungers, how it is that God really brings changes, and changes not only what you do, but changes so marvelously what you want to do. And ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know Christ, as you enter 2017,
it's your turn.
Make this the moment of the year where you invite the Savior to transform your life and give you the new hungers and the new desires. You may be a slave to certain habits. You may be in bondage to certain affections. You may be trapped and you say, Ravi, you don't know my story. I am so bound in chains. And that's what the writer once said, didn't he? The intense is the agony when the eye begins to see, the ear begins to hear, the heart begins to pound, when the soul feels its flesh and when the flesh feels its chains. When the flesh feels its chains, and you find there's one who breaks those chains and gives you the new desires and the new birth within your heart. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the gospel message at its core, that the cross of Jesus Christ is provided for your redemption, for your salvation, for your restoration, and it is the glorious message of the Christian gospel. Nowhere else. You ask a Buddhist, how do you attain nirvana? Stop desiring, pull yourself up by your own metaphysical bootstraps. You ask the Islam Muslim, how do you attain paradise? His answer will be very simple, that your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds. You ask anybody from a pantheistic worldview, the way you break karma is by allowing your goodness to outweigh your badness. And what it is that Christ does for you and me, he takes his goodness to overcome our unworthiness. And so you have it, bringing you from non-being into being, bringing you from the whole story of your transformation, of giving you new hungers, giving you new desires, and giving you a marvelous new life. I don't know if you know the story that Dr. Sangster tells us. Dr. Sangster tells us that this preacher would come from Leeds towards the north, way down to the southwest in Plymouth, in those days gone by, and he was preaching in that one small town there. And he decided to make a trunk call, as they call it, back home. And the telephone call would weave through its way, through its operators, and ultimately get to its destination point. And while he was waiting, he began to utter the words of a hymn, where he said, my knowledge of this life is small, the eye of faith is dim, but 'tis enough that Christ knows all, and I shall be with him. My knowledge of this life is small, the eye of faith is dim, but 'tis enough that Christ knows all, and I shall be with you. One of the operators listening and said, "Sir,
Okay,
sir,
I got a
will you repeat those words for me?"
stalemate here. All right, but I'll play that. I'm playing a human. That was a computer, but I'm also playing a human.
And I
So offer a draw.
started to weep and then sob and say,
Okay.
"Never know. You
And I'll just play the human here because the human has to.
So, preacher,
Like,
make
it's not good for me to let that human.
utters the words of a hymn, not knowing
I'm playing a human right now.
listening in, and the transformation that comes in the life from those four simple lines. The gospel story is beautiful. My formation, my transformation, and lastly, we come to my translation. What is that translation? That translation is simply this: the day comes where we bid this earthly world goodbye, and we are welcomed into the heavenlies, where we are getting that glorified, that new body, that incorruptible body. We must all be there at some moment. I look back upon this year and think of the friends at whose funerals I have spoken. Friends who loved us, who did so much for us, who've gone on to be with the Lord. And I know many in their younger years. My colleague Michael Ramsden's father-in-law, from diagnosis to death, was a few days in the month of December, very suddenly diagnosed with a certain form of cancer, and within a few days was gone. And so Christmas begins to look back at one empty chair, but we realize that the translation comes, and it's a moment that we do not know of, but it will come. My good friend Paul Valentine, who preached in Stowe, Ohio, was speaking at a funeral I was attending, and he tells the story of his father, who had passed away some time before. He said, "I remember being in the ambulance and driving to the hospital, and his father leaned over and said, 'Paul, I recognize where we are. We're right by the bank, aren't we?' And he said, 'Yes, Dad.' He said, 'You know, I have something in there. I have some accounts in there. Paul, I want to tell you something. All of a sudden, it doesn't mean very much. Take it, use it, yourself and the grandkids. But it doesn't mean very much anymore.' I've never forgotten that. You could be on your way to your own death and go past all the institutions that you trusted. And you say it doesn't mean very much anymore. So what abides forever? It is that relationship that God has promised you, the relationship that He wants to give you. And that's why Paul says, "Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will all be changed. Then the saying that is written will come true. Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O grave, is your sting?" C.S. Lewis says this: "Most of man's psychological makeup is probably due to his body. When his body dies, all that will fall off him, and the real central man, the thing that chose, that made the best or the worst out of this material, will stand naked. All sorts of nice things which we thought were our own, but which were really due to a good digestion, will fall off for some of us. All sorts of nasty things which were due to complexes or bad health will fall off others. We shall then for the first time see everyone as he really was, and there will be surprises." And there will be surprises.
I'm gonna have to continue this in another video because I'm running. It can't be over 15 minutes. Okay, I'll stop it right here. Bye.